Okay, recordings have started. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, so today we will continue reading the book, the Crossroads of Mundane and Transcendental Dependent Origination. So the first two readings are on the YouTube channel already, and today is the third and final reading. So we will cover the conclusion chapter. Okay, so conclusion. In conclusion, a few questions. Can we rise above ignorance? This actually is probably a common question that everyone who studies Buddhism or even learns meditation is keen to know. Can we practice so that we can overcome ignorance? So here, Venerable Sister Khema's answer is yes. Knowledge is the escape from ignorance. There is an escape. The ignorance was about not understanding how things work. So here it's important that to understand also that ignorance is the first link in the 12 links of dependent origination. And the key here to understand is what ignorance really is, because different people have different definitions and different understanding of what ignorance really is. So ignorance is about not understanding how things work, and how things work really is how the 12 links of dependent origination are described. So the Buddha's teaching gives us the knowledge we need for this to happen. By seeing for ourselves how this process works, we realize how to escape suffering. We then make more effort to use our practice to get totally free from it. So here again, when it's talking about making more effort to use our practice, basically it just means to be sincere in our practice of the 6 R's. So we are constantly just practicing 6 R's every day, day to day, not only in the formal meditation, but also in our day-to-day practice, day-to-day, how we go about in our lives. So we only have to taste this freedom to know it is possible. Then we will investigate further. Question: do we have a choice at some point to suffer or not to suffer? And the answer is yes, we do, every step of the way. This is called volition. So volition is that choice that we make. So it is your choice alone to crave and cling, or to not crave and not cling to suffering. And this is quite true. So the more we are practicing using the 6 R's, the more we get to be able to see clearly how the craving and the clinging manifests as tension and tightness in the mind and in the body. So when that occurs, it is really up to us. At that point, we can choose to continue with that craving and clinging, or we can practice the 6 R's to recognize, release, relax, re-smile, return to our object of meditation, and repeat if necessary. So as one begins to notice arising symptoms of craving, we start to train mind to take this as the signal to practice right effort. And that means the 6 R's, the steps you are taught in TWIM. As you begin to let go, relax, smile, and come back, that is, come back to the object of meditation. In so doing, you are canceling the cause of suffering and replacing it each time with a more wholesome direction. This is what purifies and retrains mind and changes patterns of behavior. And this, what the Buddha taught here in the steps of right effort, is actually also aligned with the more recent research in neuroscience and neuroplasticity. So recently I was listening to a podcast by Dr. Andrew Huberman of Stanford School of Medicine, and probably a couple of people have heard of Dr. Andrew Huberman. He is very famous with his lab called Huberman Lab. So he has podcasts, Instagram, and even a website about the research and the work that he and his team do. And what he mentioned in his podcast is they study really exactly what it says here, how to change behavioral patterns simply by canceling those negative thoughts and negative feelings or negative emotions that appear and replacing them with more positive ones. So we actually, what we are learning here essentially is what is being confirmed more recently by neuroscience and neuroplasticity. Of course, there's a lot more research going on in the background, and for those who are interested, feel free to go and Google Dr. Andrew Huberman and his work. Okay, so let's go to the next page. Next question. How does suffering slow down and stop by learning the knowledge of dependent origination and applying it during our everyday life? So this is a very important question, because even myself fall victim to this, that the whole idea of dependent origination prior to learning it this way was that it's completely out of reach. It was like so difficult to understand and didn't quite seem to make logic sense in terms of, well, yeah, previously before I came into study with the TWIM practice, my understanding of dependent origination is it was very abstract. It was really highly difficult, kind of, only accessible to people of very high level or command of the teachings of the Buddha, or have been practicing many years and things like that. So that was my belief, and that's also a common belief. But then I came into through studying this way and then realizing that okay, it's actually a very logical way of understanding things, and by understanding it this way, actually we can apply it into every event that occurs in our daily life. So it's not something that is meant to be just studied by theory or philosophical understanding, but it's actually meant to be a application into events that occur every day in whatever we are doing. So the answer here is, one thing is for certain. You confirm for yourself that mind can learn, mind can change. This is remarkable. Mind is retrainable. When mind begins to recognize the warning signs of arising suffering, that is when you begin to let go of the heat of suffering, little by little, earlier and earlier. But only if you learn this knowledge will things change. So again, coming back to what I kind of shared a little bit with Huberman Labs, they are looking into this from a scientific point of view, that really more and more recent neuroplasticity research has shown that it really is possible to, I can't remember exactly if he used the term rewire the brain or rewire the neural networks in the brain, but somewhere along those lines. Okay. Sorry, was there a question? Did someone wanted to ask a question? No, okay. Let's keep going. By understanding, applying what we learn from the links of the impersonal process of dependent origination and knowing the symptom of arising craving, we are able to observe with understanding how suffering operates and then use a routine escape plan in daily life situations that the Buddha left for us. So here are a couple of keywords we can take away. The first keyword is impersonal process. So that's something we have to constantly remind ourselves that the links that occur in every single event, the process when it occurs, every single event, how it's traveling through the 12 links is an impersonal process. It has nothing to do with so-called me, I, my. What it really is just a process that's happening. And then the second keyword here is, or the second key phrase here is knowing the symptom of arising craving. So here again, craving can be observed, or it manifests as tension and tightness in the mind and in the body. So initially we may not be able to see it very clearly, and probably it takes a while before we notice that, okay, my body's tense or my mind is tense. But the more and more we continue to practice the 6 R's, eventually there will come a time automatically where that awareness starts to be sharper, and then we will be able to detect when the tension and tightness arises, and then we will actively use the 6 R's to in a way counter that. And here that really is talking about understanding how suffering operates, which is basically when the craving arises. That's when it leads to the rest of the dependent origination links, and then using the routine escape plan. And that routine escape plan really the Buddha gave us is the 6 R's. It's as simple as that, but again, simple doesn't equal easy. So it takes countless. I remember there was a talk once that Bhante Vimalaramsi gave. It's like repeating the same thing again and again, like million, billion, trillion, countless times in the brain again and again and again and again until it becomes automatic. Although we might not escape permanently, there is no question that with each experience of letting go, our brain begins to alter, our perspective starts to change, and we feel some temporary escape and relief from suffering. And this is something that may not be like some kind of, I don't know, fireworks happening in the brain or whatever like that. It may not seem like that, but there is over time behavioral change that occurs. So I remember Venerable Sister Khema used to give examples of some of her students who used to, let's say, if they were experiencing a particular event while driving on the road, for example, that previously they would, anger would come up quite quickly. That can change to not only no anger, but also the ability to observe, like almost as though they are no longer part of that event, but rather they are just observing as though they are an observer watching a movie that is happening in front of them. And so automatically, because the practice of, the never mind game or 6 R's or letting go, release, relax, re-smile, return, repeat, keep on, going, repeating again and again until at some point, automatically, when an event occurs, the brain just doesn't respond in the same way anymore. It now automatically goes into, let go, release, relax, re-smile, return, repeat, and takes away that personalization of being part of that event. So that's really something that is, if we think about it, if we can achieve that for different events that happen in our life, that is really what is life-changing and quite remarkable. So learning about human cognition helps us learn that we can change. We can heal inside by observing how things actually work during our daily life. We can witness how suffering begins in a deeper sense by noticing the first arising signs during meditation. Mind takes the cue and the symptoms come up less often. Always remember that you can't stop suffering by forcing craving to stop and expect this kind of suppression to keep on going. That's not it. It doesn't happen that way. So a lot of times there is a strong tendency, and this is another form of craving. Whenever a feeling occurs that we don't like or the mind doesn't like, there is a strong tendency to push that negative, strong feeling away or to suppress it. So in the sense, it's kind of like us not wanting to face the fact that we could have such negative tendencies appear or have that negative feeling occur to us. And it's actually also a form of craving, and it is taking it personally, taking that negative feeling personal. It is my feeling. I am feeling uncomfortable. I am suffering. I am, this and that. So again, it comes really back to the root cause of understanding that the process itself, there's nothing wrong with the process. It's part of us as human beings, the human cognition process. What is important to understand is how the process works and how to overcome it. And it's really as simple as practicing the 6 R's. However, putting that into practice is where it's tricky. That is the tricky part. And the reason is because of our habitual tendencies that have been occurring for a very, very, very long time. So that's why we need to keep doing the 6 R's. So suppression doesn't help, because here it says that can only be temporary before craving pops up again. And this is a very interesting observation. I have seen it in myself and in other practitioners and other teachers as well. So the beauty of what the Buddha described in the teachings and what had been kind of semi-lost, the relaxed step, as one of our, Bhante Vimalaramsi mentioned countless times how important the relaxed step is. Mrs. Manjula-ji also in her recent talks explained how what sets TWIM apart from a lot of other descriptions today is the relaxed step. Is because if we're not careful and we as what Bhante Vimalaramsi says, we do not take the instructions as is and practice it really as is. So if we're not careful and in the quest or urgent need to get rid of that craving or suffering, skip the relaxed step. What could happen is that feeling we think goes away, or that negative habitual behavior. So let's take the example of anger, let's say. So if we are a naturally angry person, or there are events that occur that will make us angry. One of a recent example I had in a team meeting was my colleague, and she's by nature, she's very helpful, she's very generous, but she has certain, what she calls core values. That means deep beliefs. So each one of us have certain core values or deep beliefs. And for her, one of the deep core values for her in her life for a long time now is not to waste time. So she's the kind of person that is very focused, very goal-oriented in whatever she does, whether at work, being a mother of three, or being a wife, being, supporting her husband in his business, everything that she does and plans throughout the day, she does it with purpose, with focus, with objective. So she does not waste time at all. And because that's her core value, when she was in a conversation with another colleague the other day, and the colleague started going to a conversation that triggered in her brain, it sent a signal to her brain that this is a waste of time. And because it triggered that in her brain, immediately she reacted in a negative way. So she admitted that, after she put down the phone, she was like, what just happened? How come I, reacted so negatively to the other person when I'm not normally an angry person? Usually I'm kind, I'm generous, I help people, support them, etc., etc. And so it realized, when we discussed it as a kind of example scenario, not to take things personally, that we realized that in that conversation, it triggered her core value, her belief. So in a way, there's something of natural habitual tendency for her, for my friend, for my colleague, where the anger is suppressed, for example. So she's not an angry person by nature, but there is still that tendency when it is triggered by something. So in what we are studying here in terms of 6 hours, so that's just one example. Another example that I've seen, and I have seen this, and it shocked me when I saw this, is someone who has been practicing meditation for a really long time, practicing and teaching loving kindness meditation for a really, really long time, many years. And all of a sudden something occurred, an event occurred, and that person just, the anger from it just blew up, and it erupted so quickly that that person was completely taken back by how it happened, for like at least 3 days. For at least 3 days, that person was just like, I can't believe what just happened. So that's another example where, anger, if we are not careful in how we understand and practice this this particular way of practice, if we're not careful and we don't understand how it works, without realizing it, it can actually be suppressed and hide itself for a really long time. And we don't even know it's there until one day a particular event crops up. So the Buddha's way of teaching, how he taught right effort, really here in the previous page is mentioned in the last sentence, is what purifies and retrains mind. So those are the key words here. The 6 R's are steps to purify and retrain mind, so that, if people remember from the Chachaka Sutta, we're able to extirpate. So the word extirpate is kind of like uproot. It's like you want to take out a particular maybe a weed or something that is really big, grown really big, and you want, if we pull it out, if we pull out the weed from the top, if you've tried gardening and weeding and you pull out the weed from the top, sometimes when we pull out the weed from the top, if it's a big weed, the roots actually are still embedded in the soil. And if we let that be, what happens is after a period of time, the weed grows back again. So what the Buddha is saying, describing the steps in the Chachalka Sutta, is we are here trying to not only pull out the weed from the top, we are trying to extirpate, really uproot and lift out the weed, the root completely, so that there is no leftover or the negative habitual tendency to to come up again. Okay, let's continue. That can only be temporary before craving pops up again. Lasting change only happens through repetitive practice of right effort. With sharp observation, mindfulness reveals how suffering works, and gradually you reduce it a bit at a time by eliminating links from the end result backwards. That is, stop the birth of reaction. That is how we react to events that occur. Habitual tendencies, that's our habits, our behaviors, behavioral patterns, clinging and craving. So the clinging is that looping in the mind. Again and again, same thoughts looping. And craving, which is manifested by tension and tightness in the mind and in the brain. Stop reacting, then stop repeating habitual tendencies to react. Close your library. So that's the library of habitual tendencies. Then stop allowing the clinging stories to run in your head. And that's the looping. And now, I think Venerable Sister Khema, when in one of her talks, she said the word looping, she borrowed it from modern psychology. So in psychology, they use the word looping. And when I was listening to Dr. Huberman's podcast, he also used the word looping. So I'm guessing that looping is now a common term that's used in the study of psychology, in the study of neuroscience and change in behavioral patterns as well. And finally, stop the craving the moment you feel tightness arising. Suffering diminishes step by step because we don't go quite so far down the line into sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. We realize the consequences when we do. Suffering diminishes more permanently when you begin to eliminate the birth of reaction. So here, the birth of reaction to events that occur. So in a situation of anger between two people, for example, you might stop striking back mentally, verbally, and physically at what you don't like. And that's a first step. So that's the most important step, actually, at least in the very beginning. At least try to just stop at that point. Because when we stop, then at least we are kind of buying time to, well, stop the looping at the first step. So if we don't stop, then the birth of the reaction has occurred. So if we just tell ourselves, let's say if we are, someone is yelling at us whether it's over the phone or on the road or whatever it is, or someone sends us an email that is not very nice, not very positive. So just the action of at that moment telling ourselves, just stop, And that does help because it buys us time before we react. So then we can go back, and then if we are mindful enough, we can observe, oh, tension and tightness has occurred. Okay, let's do some 6 hours first. Let's do the never mind game. We recognize tension, tightness has arisen. Okay, so let's never mind that somebody said something to us. Never mind, we got this nasty email. Never mind, let it go, relax, smile, come back to whatever we were working on, or come back to practicing loving kindness or whatever it is, coming back to the task we're doing. And probably most times by the time, just by the activity, by just not reacting, just by stopping, that's the first step, because one of the 3 characteristics is, as what Venerable Sister Khema always reminds us, is impermanent, anicca. And so usually that situation that has arisen, it will pass, and we're just buying time to wait for it to pass. So that's the first step. Perhaps you saw or heard something that made a painful feeling come up, and usually you would jump into reaction without knowledge. That's careless habitual reaction. But if you don't strike back, then the birth of reaction doesn't happen, and then less suffering follows than before. There is less heat now in the event. Using volition, you choose to replace your usual reaction with something else. For example, just laugh. So a lot of times the situation is quite, if we just stop and think, a lot of times the situation that occurred probably is quite, can be quite funny if we start to think about it, and stop reacting. So mindfulness helps you to remember the knowledge and wisdom that leads you to respond instead. Add in a little compassion by giving the other person space to relieve their own suffering, and then add in some loving kindness. So if some of us remember in some of the talks that Venerable Sister Khema used to give, usually when the other person is striking at us or is angry at us, usually they're not really angry at us. They are angry at something about themselves. But they're not happy. In general, they're not happy. Because if a person is happy, it's very hard to be happy and angry at the same time. So as we know, the brain cannot do 2 things at the same time. So a person that's angry actually is suffering really bad, actually. And this is what's meant by kind of knowing that a little bit, having that understanding a little bit, having a little compassion by giving the other person space to relieve their own suffering. So basically it's just kind of like, in a way, an indication that at that point, at that moment, really, we probably don't have to do anything. We just need to stop, not react, give the other person space, give them some time to think, or at least to cool or calm down. Because the more we say something, the more the other person will perceive it negatively anyway. So why not we just have a little compassion and practice radiating some loving kindness, or at least have the understanding that the other person in their state of anger cannot possibly be happy at that point. Okay, next page. So the next time something similar happens, you stop just before that usual outburst. You notice how mind pulls up the same idea from your memory again. This happens like looping one action, like a waterfall on the computer. So it just keeps on looping around and repeating. And this is the same kind of stimulus as before, but this time you let go of reacting that way and you close down your habitual reactions library. You know it's there, and you decide to close the door. So we need to make that active choice, that active decision to not react. So now, there is no set plan for the birth of reaction to happen. Instead of thinking about revenge from the past, you stop there. You smile that you caught yourself. You're beginning to see this event more impersonally. Now your interest shifts to how it repeats in the same way over and over again. You see how that is happening, and so you let it fall back into the past where it belongs, and you move on in life with a more upward trend. So this is where it starts to feel like a game. So this is when the mind starts to see life as a game. So initially, the practice takes a little bit of effort, but here is where, at least in the first few instances, the mind is like, right, so this is how it works. And then when, first time, second time, it occurs, and then it probably will take a couple of times and a couple of reminders to ourselves before we start to see, it's actually a game. And probably, I don't know, probably this could be the reason why Venerable Sister Khema called her book The Nevermind Game, because it really will, at some point, feel like it's a game. Later on, when a similar event occurs, you remember how this process worked, and you remember you stopped the angry story running in your mind about why I don't like what's going on. You realize that this story from the past was the clinging link popping up, and that's the looping. You realize it's an old story from the past, or just a concept or idea that keeps on repeating. It can even be your own imagination in this mental proliferation. You realize it came up suddenly without you asking it to go, or without you asking it to. You let it go, you smile, you step back a little more, and you see this event more clearly as just what it essentially is. An impersonal process that's going on. You decide no more. So now you decide to let go of these ongoing thoughts, stories, concepts, ideas, even imagination, and decide that if this happens again, you won't dive into them. Instead, you will see more clearly what essentially is really happening in the event. The old stuff that popped into mind before was unessential, has nothing to do with what is going on now in this present time. Now things begin to change a little more. The next time you sense the shift in tension and tightness in your mind and in your body that happens as craving just begins to arise, catching this symptom early, when you now let go of it, you are preventing the I from jumping into the play. So here is where it gets interesting. Just by practicing the 6 hours, what this is trying to say is just by practicing the 6 hours more and more, until we get to the ability, the skill really, of recognizing just as begin to arise and catching that early and letting that go, what we're really doing is we're practicing more and more letting go of the I. And this is actually fundamental. This is actually the core, really. So you are actually letting go of the I in I don't like it mine. You might laugh at this. You suddenly realize, hey, this feeling is just a feeling. It arises, it's there, and it passes away. It's impersonal and impermanent. Look at that. It's not me. It's not mine. You just had an insight. You saw anicca, impermanence, happening. So you let go of this urge to crave, and you relax your mind as you smile a little smile while coming back to whatever you're doing. You're on your way to new possibilities. You have discovered the benefit of thinking, never mind, as you let go of the past over and over again. Just let it be where it belongs, in your past timeline. Now you begin to see only what is essential. You are moving into the here and now. So these few paragraphs here really are touching on something quite not only fundamental, but also quite powerful. Just by practicing this in our daily life, without sorry, I'll just try and mute someone, some people, so that it doesn't affect the recording and others. Sorry about that. Okay, so this paragraph really is quite an important paragraph, because what it's saying here is that just by practicing this, never mind, letting go, release, relax, we smile, return, repeat, what we're actually doing is we're working towards overcoming the ignorance. So coming back to what we read earlier. Okay, here. Escaping from the ignorance. So the ignorance was about not understanding how things work. The ignorance is not understanding the impersonal nature of the entire process. So coming back to where we read, this particular paragraph really is so-called the explaining that this practice is the direct antidote to ignorance. So I hope that highlights something in people. But if people care to disagree, by all means, then we should have a discussion about it. So let's keep going. So you let go of this urge to crave and you relax your mind as you smile, little smile. Oh, sorry, we covered that already. Okay, so here. Now you notice there seems to be more space in your mind, so that as you respond instead of react, you might come up with some creative and peaceful solutions for whatever is happening in your life situations. And this is really interesting. And not only is it something that we can practice, or it's being studied and taught in Buddhism, now it is also being talked about in organizational behavior or organizational psychology. So I've been listening to, I'm part of a book club in my workplace, and we are listening to a book called The Friction Project by some Stanford University professors. And their job really is to study organizational behavior. So what are tips and tricks, and what are useful practices that people can apply at work? And they study, large corporate bodies, big companies, software giants, governmental bodies, hospitals, healthcare, all sorts of organizations. They use that in the study. And one of the tips really is what they call reframing. So they use the term reframing. And if people would like, they can go and Google up Professor Bob Sutton. He's done some work on the Friction Project. He's wrote a book together with his colleague, and also run some podcast. And there's this pyramid of practices that is suggested. And at the bottom of that hierarchical pyramid is what they call reframing. And really what reframing is what's mentioned here. When we stop to react and think about how we respond, what we're trying to do is give our mind some space, and then we start to think about, how can I reframe that event or that situation, or how can I reframe my response so that we work towards something more peaceful, rather than react and make it all erupting like how it used to again. So this is not only, so basically in science now and in researchers, they are starting to come closer and closer to what the Buddha talked about. So you have begun the process of real change. Congratulations, your perspective of life is changing. You are beginning to see this impersonal nature. Go back to, of your experience in this existence is real, and it has truly begun. And now everything begins to feel a lot lighter than before. Time for a smile. And that is how you and me can use dependent origination here and now in this life to change the outcome of many interactions. And as we begin to live this practice of TWIM, it feels good because others around us are beginning to pick up our new frequency and smile too. Now it's time to smile and smile at your accomplishments and move on with life. Okay, as a small little note by Bhikkhu Bodhi, found in the Wisdom publication books on Transcendental Dependent Origination. And this is Bhikkhu Bodhi's quote. I've always been especially intrigued with the fact that by joining the two strings together, the mundane with the transcendental, it demonstrates that the two dimensions of human existence, the mundane and the transcendental, the dimensions of world involvement and world disengagement, are both governed by a single structural principle, that of dependent co-arising. So this may sound a little bit abstract to some people, but what it really means is when we read the Upanishad Sutta, which describes 24 instead of 12, that was really showing the link to how, like Bhikkhu Bodhi wrote here, the two dimensions of the mundane and the transcendental part of us, how we work as human beings, how that can actually be governed by just one single structural principle. And here the structural principle is that co-arising. From ignorance there arises the mental formations or mental preparations. From there, and then it goes on and on and on and on through 24. So my advice to you, if you are looking for an estimate of how well you are doing along your meditation path, is to keep the development chart in the Upanishad Sutta somewhere, so you can occasionally glance over to see it as you go along in your practice day to day. You will begin to see for yourself where you are. I hope this contributes to your further understanding. So last week we shared the chart that was provided by Acharya Delson that Brother Sachinji had shared with us. So that chart you can use, whether you want to use a full 24 link chart, or you want to use just a 12, or you want to use just a 7. Just a point of, feeling leading to craving, etc., etc. That's completely up to you and your practice. Whatever makes most sense. So yeah, so this is just a sharing of merit. Are there any questions or thoughts, discussions, comments? Something I said didn't make sense?
Yes, May, you have successfully completed the book. I would like to congratulate. Great.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if it's worthy of congratulation, but it was really using the opportunity just to read a book together. That's all. Yeah.
This is the second book of Sister Khema which we have completed, I think. Never Mind Game, and this is the second
yes.
book.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. So correct. So these were the two books we managed to, because there were some funds left over from some students in Malaysia. So we managed to use, so in fact, I still have some copies here with me. I will try to check when the costs are a little bit lower, because shipping costs are the ones that really is the most expensive, to try and ship them to India. Not a lot of copies.
But still, since soft copy is available, one can access in their mobile if you want. Now this Crossroads book has been uploaded in our Dhammasuka website.
Good. Yeah. So yeah, people can read it, PDF version. Indeed.
Really great, May. Your dedication to read this book has successfully made through.
Yeah, no, it's just reading a book, really.
Really great.
Yeah. But I've been listening to some podcasts very recently, and then when I listen to the podcast, I'm like, okay, so it's very similar to what, and these are either scientists or researchers, so they're not they're not they try to not be biased anyway, because they come from a scientific point of view. Yeah.
Just want to know whether any podcast of Sister Khema is separately available. I see Butter's talks in Podbean.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, in Podbean. That largely probably David Johnson did a lot of effort there. But I don't know really. I don't know if, Venerable Sister Khema during her time had time to do that. Because I remember, even when she was well and already a little bit sick, that she was constantly bombarded by people visiting and calling her and asking her questions all the time. That yeah, it was quite on her part, being able to complete these two books was quite something, given that her schedule was quite busy.
Truly.
So yeah.
And I would also appreciate Evert and Pai, Paul G, Veera Jaya sir, Nanda madam, who regularly attends this talk.
Yeah, so if people have any requests, I don't know yet next Sunday who will come on. We shall see. If no one is available, I might read something from the Therigatha that I found. But if anyone has a request, then just ping us with a request. Okay.
Evert, you can share something.
Sorry.
Evert can share any Dhamma discussion in this talk now.
Oh yeah, like reading something sometime. I suppose sometime is fine. Well, for now I'm actually quite curious what Mei dug up in the Therigatha, because there are some really nice verses in there. So anyway, I
There's
got some. Oh, excuse me.
My internet, that dropped off.
Okay, no, I can hear you. I
Sorry,
heard like I can hear you fine.
What did you say just now? You had something you wanted to request?
Oh no, I was curious about what you have for next week for Therigatha. So I'll hear it then.
Okay, let me see what I bookmarked. I found, so Therigatha is quite tricky because so what I try to do, instead of just reading the verse, I try to find the story corresponding, because then it's because I like stories and it's a little bit easier to remember. So let me see what I found. So I found one related to Kisa Gotami. So she was very famous. So she's the one with the dead child and mustard seed. And so there is a verse and a story translated by Thanisaru Bhikkhu. So that's what I found. The other one I found so far is from the Samyutta Nikaya, but also the verse linked to a verse. I found a verse in a Therigatha as well, about one of the senior bhikkhunis called Khema, was her name. And she was a bhikkhuni during the time of King Pasenadi. So that's two that I found so far. So if you have any others that you found, then yeah, do share, and then we could read that together. So the reason why I kind of was interested in Bhikkhuni Khema and some of her story and verses, so she was kind of nicknamed Khema of Great Wisdom. And so here in the early, who translated this? Hector. Okay, so it's described here in this translation that just as there were two foremost disciples in the order of monks, namely Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana, likewise the Buddha named two women as foremost amongst nuns, namely Upalavana and Khema. So the story I found was of Khema. I was trying to search for verses, Therigatas from Upalavana, but then I got a little bit stuck and I got a little bit distracted. So if anyone managed to find some content around Bhikkhuni Upalavana, who is the other foremost non-disciple apart from Khema, that would be interesting. And I thought it was interesting because there's not a lot of books written. There probably is. But in terms of the foremost disciples in the order of monks, the famous book is the 10 Great Disciples of Buddha. And when I first read that many years ago, I found that very inspiring for the practice. So that's why I thought, oh, I've never tried reading from the Therigatha, so let's see how we go. Okay. So shall we end here by sharing merits? Okay, that's great. So feel free to join in the sharing of merits.
Yes.
May suffering ones be
suffering free, and the fear struck fearlessly. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas, mighty power, share this merit powers. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu. Thanking you all, wishing all happiness. Bye.
Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Yes, bye-bye. Bye-bye to all.
Bye.
Bye.